Well, the head of Myanmar's military government, Min Aung Hlaing, has met with Vladimir Putin during a visit to Russia. Mr. Putin said the two countries were deepening economic ties and military alliance and thanked Myanmar for a gift of 6 elephants. The leaders also signed an agreement on construction of a small-scale nuclear plant in Myanmar. Russia is a key ally for Myanmar's junta, which seized power in a 2021 coup and remains under international sanctions. Well, independent Myanmar analyst David Mathieson joins me now for more on this story from Chiang Mai in Thailand. David, good to have you with us. Now, we've seen panda diplomacy in China, but now it is elephant diplomacy from Myanmar. And there was quite the offer from Russia to help Myanmar build a nuclear power plant there. How unprecedented is this, given that we know that the entire region of Southeast Asia does not have a single nuclear power plant, barring the one in the Philippines that hasn't exactly produced even 1 watt of power?
Well, unfortunately, there is a precedent for this. And Myanmar was trying to get some kind of nuclear capacity more than 15 years ago. And Moscow was actually training Myanmar army officers on nuclear physics and was toying with the idea of some kind of nuclear weapons program. How serious that is, I think, is a matter of dispute. I get the sense it really wasn't that serious. It was just something that they were toying with, and as part of a larger military-to-military cooperation program. But given that this huge state visit is a real win for Min Aung Hlaing, and that Vladimir Putin is offering that, should actually be a matter of concern for the international community, and especially for Southeast Asia, that even a small nuclear capacity in a highly volatile country like Myanmar is really not a good sign.
Exactly. I mean, I'm assuming that, it would have raised quite a few eyebrows in Southeast Asia, in neighboring countries, especially in Thailand, where you are. We haven't heard any statements yet from those leaders. Are we expecting to at any point?
I think it depends on what kind of offer there is and in what capacity. I think we're still at a preliminary stage, and I think we should be really careful about being alarmist about this. But certainly leaders in Southeast Asia should be voicing concern that such a country in open conflict and with such a clearly unstable leader and a deeply corrupt military regime, giving them a nuclear reactor is a terrible idea at this time or at any time, really.
Yes, of course, beyond the nuclear reactor or the possibility of getting one, what else was in it for Myanmar during this high-level visit?
Well, prestige, I think. For Min Aung Hlaing, who's embattled certainly from the West, I think the countries of Southeast Asia are getting really quite exacerbated with him. China's definitely concerned about the situation because they have billions of dollars worth of trade interests in the country. Even India is starting to get exacerbated. And so I think it's Min Aung Hlaing going to Moscow and kissing the ring of Vladimir Putin and, being a junior member of the growing club of dictators around the world. This gives him prestige in that world. And it continues a very close military-to-military partnership, which has been going on for 20 years. I think we've got to remember that the two militaries have been very close for a very long time. Yeah. But also cementing access to Russian firepower, fighter jets, increasingly weaponized drones, and other kinds of surveillance technology. Russia is one of the most important military partners that the Myanmar military regime has.
Yeah, so lots for Myanmar to gain, but on the other side of the ledger, what's in it for Russia?
I think for Russia, it's a very unbalanced relationship. They don't really get that much from Myanmar. Some access to raw materials, but it's not as if they need Myanmar to continue dictatorial rule in Russia, nor do they need Myanmar to continue their war of aggression against Ukraine. It's really just, it's a foothold in Southeast Asia, and it's having a client state like Myanmar to kind of show that the regional diplomacy, which is not great shakes when it comes to Southeast Asia, it's got to be said. But for them, it's a foothold in the region, and it's a counterbalance to China as well. So there's certainly something in it for Russia, but nowhere near as important as it is for Myanmar.
Yes, well, Myanmar also has been one of Russia's few vocal backers of their war in Ukraine. So, is there any possibility that you could see Myanmar follow North Korea in having boots on the ground on the front lines?
I think that's a real stretch. I think the Myanmar military have been fighting multiple opponents throughout the country for the past 4 years. have suffered losses of a different number, but I think a very similar scale to what Russia has been facing in Ukraine. A lot of its forces on the ground, really quite degraded, increasingly dependent on the use of air power and also increasingly weaponized drones. I really don't think that the Myanmar military has the personnel to actually spare to go fight in Ukraine. So I think that really is a long shot.
Yep, and then speaking of other long shots, I mean, the US has been an aid contributor to Myanmar for quite some time. So have there been any impacts on the big cuts to US aid by the Trump administration?
These cuts have been absolutely huge, and they affect everything from humanitarian assistance to food in Rohingya camps in Bangladesh, to food in refugee camps along the Thai-Myanmar border, education initiatives, support to the media and to civil society, and to civilian protection. Some of the programs that have been cut were actually helping civilians survive daily airstrikes in many parts of the country. So this has really done huge damage to the Myanmar opposition to military rule. And I think for Min Aung Hlaing, it's been a very good week for him. He's been welcomed with open arms and gets a hug from Vladimir Putin. And what was meant to be a staunch ally of the anti-regime resistance in Myanmar were just completely gutted by Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. And even to the point where Trump's been using diversity scholarships as some kind of sniggering device in mentioning Burma. And so I think he's done great material damage and great psychological damage. And it's very difficult to see that the resistance to the Myanmar military can recover from this unless other donors around the world actually come in and try and fill the gaps.
Yes, and just going back to Moscow for a moment, Min Aung Hlaing, what's this I'm hearing about him telling Putin he had found a reference to him in a book about a rat who becomes a king?
Yeah, that's really lit up a lot of Myanmar social media today. Very bizarre. He meeting with Vladimir Putin. He's like, yeah, I've got a gift, and I found this book from 1942, which is a Buddhist prophecy from the time of the Buddha, which was 2,000 years ago, and it talks about a rat who then becomes reincarnated, and 2,000 years later becomes this great king. That's very adept at weapons, so one of the strongest kings in the world. And guess what? That king is you, and you become friends with another king from Myanmar, and so the two of us are meant to actually be bosom buddies 2,000 years in the making. It was incredibly insane. And even the look on Vladimir Putin's face was like, that's a very odd thing for you to say. So I don't think that's going to affect the relationship. But I can imagine Russian officials kind of raising eyebrows about the stability of their Myanmar military partner there.
Yes, and of course, questioning that sort of prophecy. David Mathieson, really appreciate your analysis today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.